Hello. General Hospital Spoilers will reveal. The latest revelations from General Hospital suggest a dramatic upheaval may soon unfold, one that could shake Port Charles to its core. Speculation is growing that the real Drew Kane, portrayed by Cameron Matheson, might still be alive and on the verge of making a shocking return. If that theory holds true, it could mean that the man currently married to Willow, Kane played by Caitlin McMullen, is not Drew at all, but an imposter who has successfully infiltrated her life and manipulated everything around her. This possibility casts an entirely new light on the disturbing events that have already transpired, including the chilling moment Willow injected her husband and triggered a near-fatal stroke. Her action, which many interpreted as the culmination of fear, desperation, and betrayal, now takes on a more sinister dimension if the man she harmed was never truly Drew. For months, viewers and characters alike have watched Drew's behavior shift in subtle, yet unsettling ways. He began exhibiting traits that clashed with the man. His friends and family once knew his moral compass seemed misaligned. His emotional responses dulled, and his decisions increasingly reckless. These inconsistencies were often attributed to trauma or stress, particularly following his release from Pentonville prison. However, the possibility that his personality shift wasn't psychological, but rather the result of a complete physical replacement, reframes everything. Perhaps Drew didn't simply change. Perhaps he was replaced. The time he spent behind bars may have been more than just punitive. It may have been the setting for a calculated swap, orchestrated by powerful forces with a motive to use Drew's identity for their own agenda. Willow's role in this twisted tale is just as complex. If she unwittingly married an imposter, then her attempt to stop him despite how extreme may have been an act of self-defense. Yet if she suspected the truth all along and took matters into her own hands, the ethical implications are far murkier. Was she protecting herself and her family, or did she cross a line that can never be uncrossed? Her involvement in Drew's current condition, especially given his doctor's pessimism about his recovery, suggests that she may have believed there was no other way to end the nightmare. But that doesn't absolve her of responsibility if this entire scheme involved premeditated harm. Even to someone pretending to be her husband, the possibility that the real Drew is still alive introduces a new wave of questions. Where has he been all this time? Who has been holding him? And what was the purpose of replacing him in the first place? If he returns, what will he remember, and more importantly, who will believe him? The trauma he may have endured, coupled with the knowledge that his identity was stolen and weaponized against those he loves, could forge a deeply altered version of the man he once was. Furthermore, his return would not only invalidate the marriage with Willow, but could also trigger a cascade of legal, emotional, and psychological consequences for everyone involved. His relationships with Willow, with Scout, with Sam, with Monica would all be called into question, each of them altered by the lingering doubt of whether they were built on lies. From a narrative standpoint, this twist could be the perfect opportunity to reset Drew's character arc, especially after a long period where fans have felt he was adrift or underutilized. A storyline centered around identity theft, brainwashing, or even high-level corporate or WSB interference would restore a level of intrigue and intensity to his presence on the canvas. It would also serve to recontextualize his recent actions, allowing the show to explore the emotional wreckage left behind when someone realizes their life has been lived through the eyes of a stranger. For Willow, the emotional fallout could be just as intense. She would have to grapple not only with the guilt of harming a man she thought was her husband, but also with the trauma of having been emotionally manipulated and possibly romantically violated by a man who wasn't who he claimed to be. The clues have been sprinkled methodically throughout recent months: Drew's cold detachment, his sudden moral flexibility, his erratic emotional responses, and his strange distance from the people who once knew him best. Each red flag could be reinterpreted as evidence of an ongoing impersonation. The timing of these shifts, beginning almost precisely after his release from Pentonville, is perhaps the most damning of all. That period of vulnerability could have allowed someone with resources and a vested interest in controlling Drew's assets or relationships to orchestrate a sinister switch, especially if he was being monitored or surveilled by enemies from his past in the WSB. or other Black Ops affiliations. If the real Drew is about to return, it sets the stage for a powerful confrontation between truth and deception. Those who trusted the imposter will feel betrayed, ashamed, and furious. Those who suspected the truth but stayed silent will be forced to answer for their inaction. Willow will likely be the most emotionally torn, caught between her horror at what she's done and the strange relief that she didn't harm the real Drew after all. But even if her actions are morally justified, the damage cannot be easily undone. Relationships will fracture, loyalties will shift, and the very foundations of identity will be tested in Port Charles. More importantly, the deeper question still remains: who orchestrated this? An imposter doesn't insert himself into someone's life without support. This means someone else, possibly someone powerful, dangerous, and still operating behind the scenes, stands to benefit from the deception. It could be Victor's remnants, a rogue faction of the WSB, or even someone within the medical or legal systems of Port Charles. Whoever it is, their presence still looms, suggesting that Drew's story is far from over, and that this revelation may just be the beginning of a larger, more dangerous unraveling of truth. In the end, if Drew Kane is truly alive, the world around him is on the verge of implosion. Lives have been built, decisions made, and futures altered based on the belief that the man walking among them was Drew. To discover that he wasn't is to accept that Port Charles has been operating under a fundamental lie. The emotional aftermath will be staggering, and the path forward uncertain. But for those who have waited for justice, for truth, and for a reunion that once felt impossible, this may finally be their reckoning. It was around the time Drew began to noticeably diverge from his core identity that a new, chilling theory began to take shape, one that, if true, could upend every relationship, every alliance, and every belief in Port Charles. The subtle changes in his personality, which many had dismissed as post-traumatic reactions following his release from Pentonville, now seemed far too deliberate to be coincidental. His emotional detachment, unpredictable decisions, and growing coldness toward those closest to him suggest not healing, but replacement. Within the world of daytime drama where reality bends at the will of narrative necessity, it becomes almost too easy to envision an arc in which the real Drew Kane was kidnapped, spirited away in secrecy, and replaced by a surgically altered or cloned doppelganger with a dangerous agenda. What may have once sounded absurd is now taking the shape of a highly plausible and terrifying truth. The seeds for this twist may have been planted long ago, but they have begun to sprout in tandem with the increasingly shady dealings of Jens Sidwell and Ross Cullum. Jens, with his murky affiliations and untraceable motivations, has always hovered at the edges of the story like a storm waiting to strike. Ross, as the director with access to highly classified information and medical facilities, presents the perfect logistical conduit through which a switch or scientific manipulation could be orchestrated. When the two figures are considered together, the implication is disturbing. They may have conspired to create or implant a false Drew into the lives of those who love him, either as part of a larger control plan or as part of a black market genetic experiment. In either case, the integrity of every interaction Drew has had since Pentonville becomes questionable. The emotional weight of this implication cannot be understated. Lives were lived, decisions made, and trauma endured, all with the assumption that Drew was present and real. To discover it may have been a lie would ripple through Port Charles like a seismic shock. The long-standing rumors about cloning projects in the General Hospital universe have never fully disappeared. Given the long and twisted history of experimental science in Port Charles, from memory mapping to brainwashing to full-body doubles, introducing a clone Drew is not just within the realm of possibility, it's almost expected. If that path is followed, it is conceivable that Willow unknowingly married a genetic replica of Drew, programmed or conditioned to manipulate, destabilize, and control. The ethical questions are staggering. Can a clone love? Can he consent? Is he responsible for his actions or simply a puppet? For Willow, these are not academic questions. They become painfully personal. Her marriage, her loyalty, her guilt, and her decisions all hinge on the identity of the man she believed she loved. If she risked her life and future to protect herself and others from a man who was never real, does that absolve her? Or does it only deepen the sense of violation and betrayal? Soap operas thrive on the improbable becoming reality, and history has shown time and again that imposters can be more destructive than any external villain. They infiltrate from within, corrupting families, companies, and romances from the inside out. They wear familiar faces, speak in familiar tones, and offer false comfort all while serving goals that remain hidden until the damage is already done. If Drew's impostor was planted with strategic intent, then every movie made every decision. Every betrayal was part of a larger plot. It could have been to gain access to WSB files, to dismantle the LQ from within, or to break the emotional foundations of Jason's allies and Willow's stability. The motive, whatever it may be, is likely tied to something far larger than personal revenge. The presence of Jen Sidwell in this equation ensures that the stakes are not just emotional. They are political, financial, and potentially global. Furthermore, if the real Drew has been held somewhere, possibly in a coma, imprisoned, or under constant surveillance, his return would be emotionally catastrophic and narratively explosive. His memories would offer painful truths, not only confirming the deception, but likely revealing the names of those who enabled it. His body may carry the scars of captivity. His mind may be fractured by isolation, but his presence would validate the long-held suspicions of those who never felt the new Drew was quite right. His reappearance would also pit him against the imposter in a psychological and emotional battle, with Willow, Sam, Scout, and the entire Corinthos family caught in the crossfire. This storyline, if realized, provides the writers with a goldmine of dramatic potential. It could reconnect Drew with his own legacy, restoring a heroic foundation that has been diluted in recent years. It would also allow Willow to explore themes of violation and healing, as she grapples with the horrifying reality that the man she trusted in her most vulnerable moments was never who he said he was. More than that, it would cast doubt on every decision made during this period of deception, allowing for a sweeping reevaluation of current alliances and rivalries. The moral implications would be far-reaching. Who knew, and when? Did anyone suspect the truth and remain silent? Were their signs ignored out of love, loyalty, or denial? These questions would haunt every character connected to Drew's life. Jason, if he returns, would likely be the first to demand answers, driven by both familial love and deep-seated distrust of anyone pretending to be his brother. Monica would be shattered, having potentially bonded with a clone, a fabricated creation, instead of the son she believed she'd regained. Sam would feel violated all over again, her already fragmented history with Drew now further corrupted by this breach of identity. And yet, perhaps the most tragic consequence would be Willow's. She believed she had found stability, even love, in a world that had only ever given her hardship and grief. If that foundation crumbles beneath her, the psychological toll would be devastating. She would question her judgment, her memories, and her self-worth. The public fallout would be just as brutal. Friends, co-workers, and the media would all scrutinize her decisions, especially her role in the stroke incident through this new lens. Was she a victim, a hero, or something more complicated? In the end, the concept of a Drew imposter isn't just a twist for shock value, it's a mechanism that allows General Hospital to explore the very nature of identity, love, trust, and the fragility of perception. If it turns out that the man who has walked among them is not who he appeared to be, then every character must confront how easily even the most familiar face can become the most dangerous mask. And as the pieces of this puzzle begin to align, with Sidwell and Ross operating in the shadows, and clues pointing toward secret programs and unholy alliances, the only question that remains is not whether this is possible, but whether it's already too late to stop. Even if Drew were to make a miraculous recovery in the future, his return would not be the end of the story. In fact, his recovery could only deepen the mystery and raise even more profound questions about the identity of the man who has been living among those who love him. As the storyline develops, the possibility of another Drew, a version of him who has been manipulated or replaced, emerging is not only plausible but perhaps inevitable. This would lead to a situation where the man claiming to be Drew Kane would be forced to confront a truth he cannot deny, that his identity is being questioned, and the real Drew has returned to reclaim what was once his. If Drew does manage to escape the mysterious confinement where he has been held, the revelation of his captivity would be nothing short of explosive. The idea that Drew was forced to undergo experiments in a high-tech laboratory, possibly involving memory manipulation or genetic alterations, introduces an entirely new level of complexity to his character's journey. What if Drew was subjected to a series of inhumane trials, designed not just to break him physically but to rewrite who he was at his core? The ethical and moral implications of these experiments would shake Port Charles to its foundation, and Drew would be forced to navigate the psychological and emotional fallout of reclaiming his identity after being forcibly reprogrammed. The return of the real Drew could set the stage for one of the most dramatic confrontations in the history of the soap. The imposter who has been living Drew's life, marrying Willow, and making decisions on his behalf, would now be faced with a dilemma that goes beyond mere survival. What would happen when Drew's memories and experiences start to clash with those of the man who has been impersonating him? The imposter, once confident in his deception, would now find himself exposed, forced to answer questions he simply cannot. What happened to Drew during the time he was gone? Why did his behavior shift so dramatically? And perhaps most importantly, what secrets does he carry that the imposter does not? For Drew, the journey back to Port Charles would be no less complicated. Returning after such a long absence, especially after everything that has transpired in his absence, would force him to confront not just the imposter, but the wreckage left behind. His relationships with his family, with Willow, and with everyone who once knew him would be irrevocably changed. How could he ever explain the trauma he endured while being held in captivity, especially if it involved personal violations or experiments designed to erase or alter his identity? And how would those who thought they knew him reconcile the man they believed to be Drew with the truth of who he really is? In many ways, Drew's return would serve as a powerful test of trust, identity, and loyalty. Would those who have been closest to him, Sam, Jason, Monica, and the others, believe that he is the real Drew? Could they accept that the man they had known, the one they had loved, could be someone entirely different now? And what about Willow, whose own guilt over what she did to him might complicate her ability to accept the truth? The emotional stakes would be astronomical, as Drew would have to not only reclaim his life but also rebuild relationships that had been torn apart by the imposter's actions. On the other side of this conflict, the imposter would be under intense pressure. The cracks in his facade would begin to show, particularly as Drew starts to piece together the mystery of his captivity. Was this imposter working alone, or was he part of a larger scheme orchestrated by powerful figures like Jen Sidwell or Ross Cullum? The larger conspiracy could become a driving force, propelling Drew and his allies into a dangerous race to uncover the truth. With every new revelation about the experiments and manipulations Drew endured, the mystery would deepen. Who was behind his abduction, and what were they hoping to achieve by replacing him? The stakes would grow ever higher as Drew and those around him pieced together a puzzle that would have far-reaching consequences. The emotional ramifications of Drew's return would extend beyond the immediate relationships he's been part of. There's also the broader impact on his role in the world. As an influential figure in both the corporate and social spheres of Port Charles, his return could have seismic effects on ELQ, the WSB, and many other institutions that rely on his skills, expertise, and leadership. The corporations and individuals who have thrived in Drew's absence may now find themselves at odds with the reality of his return. Would Drew want to reclaim his place at the helm of ELQ, or would he choose a different path, one focused on redemption and uncovering the truth about what happened to him? At the same time, Drew would be forced to confront a much larger philosophical question. What happens when a person's identity is stolen? Is it possible to rebuild everything from the ground up? Or does the shadow of the imposter continue to haunt every interaction, every decision, every moment? Could Drew ever truly be the man he was before? Or would the trauma of what happened to him render that impossible? His return, both as the true Drew Kane and as someone deeply changed by his experiences, would raise profound questions about the nature of identity and the consequences of living a lie. In the world of General Hospital, where lives are constantly altered by power plays, corporate intrigue, and shifting allegiances. Drew's storyline is poised to be one of the most compelling chapters in recent memory. As new developments unfold, and as Drew works to reclaim his identity, the twists and turns will undoubtedly keep fans on the edge of their seats. One thing is certain, the story of Drew Cain is far from over, and the impact of his return will ripple throughout Port Charles for years to come. Sources from General Hospital confirm that there are still many twists and surprises ahead for Drew. So stay tuned as this intricate and emotional story continues to unfold. The journey to uncover the truth, to reclaim what was stolen, and to restore his place in the world will be filled with shocks, revelations, and ultimately, a resolution that could change everything.